Now be recorded.
This is the Finance Committee of Council. It's 2/9/2021, 7:10. Present are members Schuman and Broussard. Mr. Kelly may be delayed. Council members Williamson, Glassburn, Limpert, Heeman. The mayor, council president, directors Garreau, Hopfer, Lieber, Gallo. I think that's everybody. First, we're going to talk about 2021-12, which is an ordinance amending section 130-106 entitled Authority to Accept Donations of Chapter 131 of the Administrative Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted, entitled Mayor, in order to allow the mayor to accept any cash gift card or cash or gift card donation to the Division of Youth and Family Services or the Division of Asia. Is this Director Lieber? Is this you? Or
thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a follow-up to the discussion we had at the previous Finance Committee meeting where a gift card donation of, I believe, around $2,400 was given. And so we're requesting just for these two divisions to have the ability to accept without going through a legislative process, so long as we follow the reporting requirements in the code. Thank you.
it makes a lot of sense to me. I think we already did discuss this potentially coming up. So, Mr. Broussard, do you have anything?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Any questions from council? President Jones, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it appropriate at this time to ask for Director Garreau? I know that when he was on council many years ago, he was the original author of this section of the code. Would it be okay for him to describe a little bit to council about the history of, why he brought this forward in the first place, please?
I don't have a problem with it. Director Garreau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so this goes back to the late 1990s, and the history of it is that at the time there was an attempt to do a private fundraising effort by a number of members of the administration were involved in under Mayor Musial, and that private fundraising effort was to raise money for the skate park, which I think you're familiar with. We still have back there at the skate park behind the rec center. It happened to be taking place at the same time that we were doing our first contract for Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. Those were the two vendors. And at the time, it kind of became obvious what was happening is that there was at least some attempt by a member of the administration to solicit donations at the same time that there was this for the private fundraising effort, at the same time that there was a contract being awarded. So the concern at the time was that we wanted to make sure we knew what donations were taking place and when they were taking place. It was, if anything, it was more designed as a to ensure that there wasn't something inappropriate taking place, that there wasn't some sort of I'll donate money and then expect to get something back in return, which was the original concern back in the late 90s. And that was kind of almost what was happening at the time. It not only was it a solicitation for fundraising money for the skate park, but once one party gave an offer, then it went back to the other entity and said, well, what can you give? And it was really, I thought at the time, unseemly, and I thought we were better than that, and that's where this ordinance came from. So the beginning origin of it was the idea that we would, if there were going to be donations made, that we would know who was making them, and we would know, a little bit more about what the background was if donations were being accepted by the city. That was the history of it. That's where it came from.
Thank you, Director. Council President, you have another comment you want to?
I do. I'm sorry, but I saw that another council member's hand was up. I could follow up after that.
Ms. Heeman, go ahead.
Thank you. Quick question. Are we going to get like a 6-month reporting? Is that what was decided, Mr. Chair? Like, we would just get a report of like the 6 months if we had donations and who they were from, or was it going to be annual? I think that was the only thing I was interested in. Thank you.
Director Lieber?
I think our thought was quarterly, that seemed frequent enough, but feasible to not burden staff with reporting every single donation. So that was our target, was quarterly reports.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Did you have anything else, Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you and your committee might be willing to entertain some possible amendments, I think that could help strengthen this section of the code. And I think would address some of the concerns too that council members had last year when this kind of came to light and we all started looking into this. So for example, if council would consider allowing people to make a donation regardless of the division that the donation is going to, so that it wouldn't be only, for example, donations going to community life services, that it could be across the board, any division in the city. And without prior authorization of council, unless one of these exceptions were met. So one exception would be any company or person or organization that currently has a contract or is planning to come before the city to do business. I don't presume to know the language. We would obviously like to have Director Garreau's input on that. But as far as the precise wording of that, it would be to ensure that the original intent of this section of the code then is upheld, just as Mr. Garreau had explained earlier. But I mean, basically what it boils down to, if company A was bidding on some type of city services, then any donation offer for them would not be accepted unless city council had authorized that. Another exception to this would be any amount over $2,000. I'm not like set on that particular number. It would double the current amount, which is $1,000. And I certainly don't want to propose that council gets this number so high that there's never any review of donations, but I also don't want it to be too low because as Director Lieber pointed out, you obviously don't want staff just spending all of their time reviewing donations that are coming into the city. And then the final exception would be any donation that could alter current constructed property on the city.
Director Lieber, do you have a comment about that? You have anything?
In terms of other divisions being able to accept monetary donations with a list of exemptions, they may welcome that. I imagine there could be other divisions where donations might be made specifically around safety. Police and fire might be another area where donations come in for programs that they run. And in terms of the amount, you know, any increase over the current 1,000 will help. The same gift cards that I brought to you last month, I think with the $2,000 limit would have still come to you, but you know, I can imagine that there might be a ceiling to be discussed. So, you know, I'm anything better, anything over $1,000 is better. So if council wants to move it up to 2,000, that will still reduce. I just say over time, as just people become more generous, we've been seeing more donations of a higher level, which is amazing. I don't know if that'll last forever, but it's nice to be able to accept them quickly and send them a thank you letter and put them to good use. So however council sees fit. Thank you.
Mr. Broussard, I'd be willing to hold this in committee and let Mr. Garreau take a whack at some of these, if you would.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, but I was also about to weigh in on the $2,000 threshold level. Currently, yeah. I'm comfortable with that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we hold this in committee and subject to some amendments that were suggested by the council president. How's that sound?
And I'll second that.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. 2-0 to holding committee. All right. Next on the agenda is 2021-14, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of North Olmsted to apply for and, if approved, accept a grant ordered by the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, NOPEC, Energized Community Grants for 2021 and declaring an emergency. I'm not sure who's taking this. Mr. Mayor, are you on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Yeah, NOPEC Energized Community Grant provides grants for NOPEC member communities to finance eligible efficiency or energy infrastructure projects. In 2021, we are eligible for $82,403. In the past, we used the NOPEC grant monies for City Hall HVAC upgrades, LED streetlight upgrades, and North Olmsted Fire Department roof and window repairs. For 2021, if approved by NOPEC, the funds will be used for a garage ventilation system. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Is this the garage ventilation that we had in the budget originally? Is that
Yes,
what
we had talked about it. Yeah.
Okay. Did we actually have that still in the budget? I'm sorry, I can't remember. Carrie?
No, Mr. Chair, we did not have it in the temporary budget that the administration brought forward to council, but it is in this one, the permanent budget, because we felt it was a big priority, and it was one of the first things that we talked about bringing back to the budget once we found out our carryover and our situation a little better.
I take it we've gotten these grants before, because then we got the energy grants for windows and stuff before. So this is something we probably will get. We have the hope. Okay. Okay. Any questions from committee? Mr. Broussard?
None.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we recommend 2021 to all of council and ask for a second.
Second.
2-0 to recommend. All right. I'm sorry. Aye. All right. Last, we have 2021-15, which is an ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the city of North Olmsted for the year ending December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency. Now, this is the mayor's budget. It's his prerogative, and it's also part of his job. So I'm going to let Mr. Mayor, are you going to take this? You want to carry?
Well, I'll let Carrie go through the budget, and then we can talk about specific issues.
I'd like to just kind of hold this. I don't want to go line by line, since this is just, we want to go over the changes that are being proposed.
Okay. I hope that you all got the revised, I know it keeps getting smaller spreadsheet, but I tried to categorize them so that we could look at the types of things that are getting added to the permanent appropriations from the administration final. And I also sent to council and the administration a spreadsheet showing when council did the so that, because some people asked, well, what happened to our amendments? And so I went through them and reflected where those amendments, if they are not in this current budget of the mayor's. So the first thing is that there were some things that we had cut at the last, like they were one of the last things to cut to balance our budget. We made some tough choices. If you remember back in the fall, some of these, the COVID cases were going up. No one really knew what was going to be happening with the economy, and it's getting a little clearer, I think. But so we decided to do a bare bones budget, and some of these items we intended on bringing back into the administration budget. Not that they were ever presented to council, but they were in our deliberations as the administration before it was presented to you. And those include the reappraisal of our property for insurance purposes. This we have not done in quite some time. And I think we did it right before the, like in 2012. And the wastewater has had large additions, which we send them our improvements, our capital improvements, and add to it. But it's really important to get a proper appraisal of our property for insurance purposes. The other is the building department permit and code enforcement software. These are items, they've been doing demos and looking at it, and they said, well, if we have to wait, we can, but they would like to continue looking and maybe start making a commitment after the busy season of 2021. The other is the technical assistant program and grants that the plan economic development for proposed businesses, and the planning director and the mayor and actually the building department discussed these things that would be helpful to bring forward new businesses, smaller businesses that need that help. I won't go into the merits of it. I'm just talking about the funding. The fleet ventilation system for the garage, which we discussed, it's $122,000, but we have the 80-some thousand that's coming from the NOPEC grant. So it's a real opportunity for us to get it done. And then there's iWork for the sidewalk inspection program. Originally, we talked about not doing the sidewalk program, but they still have to inspect to be able to move forward to do the assessment in the subsequent year in 2022. So they really want to add the software for iWorks for the infrastructure for sidewalks. And so this is in the sidewalk fund. The jail plumbing project, we had talked about it, that they're having issues with it, and it was on our watch to add to it, but we wanted to wait and make sure that we had monies available in prior capital borrowings for building facilities, which was the police station roof and HVAC, and then the city HVAC. We combined the scraps that were left over, and we are paying for that project out of that. And then, of course, we talked about the small business relief grant program that council and the administration agree as a program that they want to move forward with. The family and youth services, they have endowed balances that need to be appropriated. And the same with some of the special revenue funds for the police department. They have endowed balances, and usually we wait till the end of the year to see how much is in that fund left remaining before we appropriate for it. So those are things that usually get done after the end of the year. And then the borrowed funds for specific projects that can, only be for those specific projects, which is stormwater management, traffic signalization. We have like 20-some thousand left from the finance computer system, and the sanitary system improvements as well in the sanitary sewer fund. So those are unappropriated amounts from borrowed funds that we carry forward for those projects. And then there are also things that are included in the permanent appropriations that we didn't have knowledge of while the temporary was passed. One of which we were subsequently notified that we received a $100,000 grant for Clegg Park improvement. And then our commitment is $65,300. So we had to account for that. And then as we discussed the NOPEC grant, we just got word of that at the beginning of the year, the amount. And then the other item is the mini excavator. There was when they went to look at going to order it, they realized that when they told us the budgeted amount, They only budgeted for like the basic piece of equipment and then the main accessory, but they need some of the other accessories, and they had gone through and decided it, but it was not in the budget. So so those are also added into that line item for those. And then when the mayor's court, when the lobby opened and we started working mayor's court in City Hall again, they utilized the building department windows to help facilitate people coming in and out and paying. And they realized that they needed another surface to be able to easily take over their Baldwin software over there to utilize it in collecting the fines and the penalties and clearing it. So that is an additional amount. And then there are other things in the permanent appropriations that are actually just corrections to the temporary. There were no patrol uniform expenses that were budgeted for the new officers. And if they go, so police officers, they get a uniform provided to them when they start, and then they start getting a uniform allowance through their union contract, prorated the next January. So, and additionally, if they go to like the schools, like Opata schools and stuff like that, for the new officers who have to be trained, they have uniforms that they have to purchase from there as well. So they put monies in there for that, and they had completely forgotten about it, and I didn't ask either. So it's important to have it in there. Additionally, there were 3 information system items that were budgeted in the capital fund in the temporary. And it was supposed to, they don't have any more borrowed monies for this. And it was supposed to be then budgeted and expended out of the general fund, and it didn't get done. So I'm moving the expenditures, because there's no money in the capital fund for them, into the general fund where it had intended to be paid out of. And then the RETA tax collection fees, they were budgeted for in the general fund, but they were not budgeted for in the 290 and 295 fund, which is permanent improvement and solid waste funds. And since they get 15% of the income tax collections, they also have a share of the collection expense, and that was just an error. And then also another error was that part-time building maintenance wages and the related pension and Medicare expenses were not entered into the temporary for Springvale, and they brought it to our attention. We said, we'll add it when we go to the permanent budget, and that's what we're doing now. They've always had building maintenance wages. It's just we do part-time wages differently, and it didn't get entered. So those are like the categories that I'm trying to explain the different types of things that have caused this budget to change from the final temporary for of the administration to this one. Is that a good overview, Mr. Chair?
That's fine with me. Mr. Broussard, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open up to council. Mr. Glassburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This list of changes increases expenditures by $2 million, of which roughly 1.25 aren't borrowed funds. Where are the offsetting cuts or revenues that are paying for these changes?
Director?
If you see on the side of the spreadsheet, the general fund is increasing by 204,800. That's the increase and decreases in the general fund. The economic development fund with both the technical assistance program and the business relief grant are increasing by 54, and both of those are using the ending fund balance as the ability to pay for those. Clegg Park is in the Clegg Park Fund. That's fund balance. The court computerization fund is using existing fund balance. And the fleet ventilation system is using, and the additional mini excavator and the 282, that's a street maintenance and repair fund. And they have ending on their balance can handle it as well. And remember that the 156 is offset by $82,403 that is coming in from the grant. The tax collection fees and the sidewalk, those are all from fund balances, which are fine and appropriate. The ones that are in green are the on the spreadsheet, if you did it in color, the stormwater management, traffic signalization. Those are monies that are borrowed. So other than the 42,000, those are, so it's 674,000 are borrowed monies that are in that fund for that purpose. The endowment and grant monies, those are coming from monies that have been previously donated. And so that's for those specific purposes. So it's appropriate. We know that the COVID relief, the CARES Act COVID relief carryover for the grant for businesses, that's the fund balance that's paying for that. The same with the, and I think we talked about the finance computer system in jail are in, those are monies that have been borrowed, so the funds are in that. The Clegg Park improvements, the $100,000 is coming from a grant, and we're transferring to the capital improvement fund from the general fund, the $65,300, which is our contribution. And I believe that was spelled out when we apply for those grants. And let's see, the Springvale wages, those are normal recurring expenditures, and they are coming out of the carryover balance, as well as the sanitary system improvement is borrowed monies. And the engineering escrow, I don't think I mentioned that. There are $200,000 in there that are deposits that for projects and contractors that need to be, that we hold in deposit and we return them. So the monies that are in that fund balance are to be repaid. So that's $200,000 of that as well. So so go ahead. Sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may continue, that was helpful, but I guess I should have refined my question. Some of these items, besides the bonded items, the 750,000 or so of bonded items, you know, we got maybe another couple 100,000 of grant items in here, but we're still talking about another $1 million or so of spending that is coming out of reserves from a variety of accounts. Is that a correct assessment?
It doesn't look like that much. So, but I mean, I'll have to check that, what that $1.7 million, I want to check that formula, because when you add the other numbers, I don't know, I guess maybe it is when you add the totals and the funds, but I mean, a lot of these things, that's what the money was for. And the general fund, you know, of the 248,000, 100,000 of it, or 99,300, we're transferring for the Economic Development Fund and the Clegg Park Project Fund, which we all agree are important things. So, I mean, that's not increasing the general fund. And these other funds, that was their intended purposes of it.
Well, I'm not getting yet to the validity of any given expenditure. I'm just trying to understand if I'm interpreting these numbers correctly. I'm trying to understand. I mean, the very first fund summary we had for the temporary appropriation budget, we were taking in 57 million and we were spending 56. So we were net gaining 1. Over the course of the temporary budget, it became a net negative of 4. And now that 57 of revenue is now 69 million of revenue. And that 56 million of expenses is now 75 million for a net spend of 6 million more than what we're taking in. And the total resources has increased by 17 million. This just looks like a completely different document than what we had as the temporary budget. And I guess I'm trying to understand what has changed.
Well, I think if you look at the estimated carryover balances, the preliminary that we start with the budget, those changed. And I was being conservative on some because I hate going through the budgeting process and coming up with a million things that we're going to do, and then we have to cut them because I overestimated what the carryover balance was going to be. So I will say that it's conservative, but I think it's been successful in the budgeting process. And if you look at the fund balance or the summary with the carryover balances, I believe we have like almost $1 million in the general fund that instead of the original temporary where there was 859 projected, which is a projection and not what really actually happens. A budget is just a point in time and a guideline, and we monitor it and we change it accordingly, as we did dramatically. So I guess, anyone else have any questions?
I'd like
Mr. Chair, I'll yield to others, but I have a lot more. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So let me just mention that Mr. Kelly is at the meeting now. So go ahead, Ms. Heeman, you have something?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to know about the iWorks and the Munis, right? So you're now having in this budget, the building department is, proposing that it's going to move to iWorks. We were still talking about outside of a requisition entry and then maybe self-serve for payment, and what's going to happen to Munis? What departments would still be using Munis? And then does iWorks have options for those other departments to transfer from Munis to iWorks? We didn't dive too deeply into that when we had the committee meeting about that subject, because we were just, moving that one contract portion through for our, for Mr. Demeline and the, the streets. So I'd like to know more about that. And then does it make any sense really to kind of wait and find out if there are better options with, with iWorks and Munis? It seems like we're paying an extra $55,000 more at a minimum for something, and then plus maybe other components for Munis.
Director Gallo, do you want to take that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, the building department has reviewed 3 different vendors. We have not made an official decision on which vendor we are going to go with if we move. But one of the vendors is iWorks that we're looking into because some of the other departments like service uses it, and some of our end users in the building department like it. So what we are doing right now is there is a Munis upgrade coming up soon. We're going to see how that works out. So what I did was I made sure we budgeted in case we move from Munis this year, and the $20,000 would hopefully cover the cost of if we move to another program like iWork. Whether it makes sense or not to wait, I don't know, that would probably be up to Carrie, Director Kopfer, or the mayor. I will say the IT department has pushed for the SaaS option, but I mean, we've gone this long without it.
Could you explain that to us? The SaaS, what is that?
Yes.
Director Kupfer has.
I have my hand up, if I can.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, in the original temporary budget, we discussed moving to a hosted product, Tyler hosted, and that's what the SaaS is, software as a service. And it is more pricey, and you saw that in the budget. I think that's what Councilman Heeman was discussing, the 50,000 in the city total. But the problem is that we can't upgrade with the servers that we have. We need a new server. So that's 25,000 right there. So not software. So if we choose not to do software as a service, I still need to buy a new server then. And then I need IT support because, and which I had in the budget last year to do, because our IT department has some big projects that they're working on, and they want someone who's more responsive to our needs when we need them. And so that was what we were going to do. And so that's 25, and then I think there was 20. So that's 45,000 of expenditures we need. And they really recommend just going to the Tyler hosted and not do that. And then we won't have future expenditures of, because there's 3 servers that run the Munis system. So, and if building decides to leave, then the cost is less for the maintenance and support in the future. But we have to pay for support until they choose what they want to go forward with.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you so much. So we've been talking about this for a long time, over a year, coming up on 2. And my curiosity is, so you're budgeting for all of these things and we still don't know what direction we're going in, and we're no closer to knowing that. And so it seems like a lot of money for unknown items when in fact, it seems like iWork seems to be the one that people prefer. We're still sort of stuck on Munis because I don't know why, but that's what I'm starting to wonder about here is when is the decision actually going to be made, and why do we have to continue to kind of have this all in the budget with no decisions ever being made, and then we keep. Thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
You're right. They have been in the budget, and I will agree with you, Councilwoman Heeman, that it's been very frustrating. And Ms. Gallo will attest to the fact that IT is working on. First, we had the infrastructure project where the IT department was like couldn't hold the network infrastructure without it going down. Then we had the redundancy one. We have the phone system. We have a lot of these big projects, and yeah, they've all been delayed, but they're lining up, and we can't move forward with what we need to do until some of those are solved. And IT has recommended to go to the software as a service, and I agree with them, because then it takes the onus off of our internal IT department and puts it on the updates and the upgrades and all that onto Tyler, because they're hosting the whole thing. And so this is where a lot of softwares have been going to, is having it hosted and not hosted on our local networks. And that's what we are moving to. And the monies, remember, Munis was in 2005, we purchased it originally, and it's a financial accounting software package. So you're not going to be able to get rid of Munis for iWorks. Maybe you might move the building department off for their permits and code enforcement, but that doesn't mean that there is still not an accounting and financial system that every division and department uses, because it's their accounting system. It manages their budget. It helps them look up information. And that's how we pay our bills, our payroll, collect our revenue, everything. So it's still going to be here. Maybe not a couple of departments that you're referring to, but the main portion of it is going to be here.
One more question, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So in essence, you know, all of these departments have to use Munis because it's a financial component. So iWorks has no financial component. It doesn't integrate into a financial component, or you just don't want to use it. I'm confused, because I think it's actually cumbersome probably for folks to have to know both systems, when it seems like iWorks is starting to seem to be the preferred by all of the other departments. So are we hanging on to Munis because there's no offering in iWorks for that component?
Mr. Chair, you don't want to go through a computer conversion just because there may be another software that works too. The financial module and accounting module we're perfectly happy with. And so there's no need to change. And there's a lot of cost involved in changing software. And why would you put the city through that if that isn't a necessary component? The iWorks is for the service department. And if, like, for example, in this budget, the Ms. Lieber was saying for the sidewalk program, those are like capital asset GIS layers, and that's different than what the financial accounting software package of Tyler/Munis is.
Mr. Limper.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to voice as well that my biggest concern is that these conversions become, one is the planning of it is a several-year process if you want to do it right to understand compatibilities, et cetera. But what I would like to do is make sure that we fully understand sort of the ongoing costs of conversion that we're going to be taking on beyond this year's budget, because this won't be complete within 1 year. And I would like to have some follow-up meetings, not necessarily for the budget, but to get better understanding of more of the operational requirements that come into play for service as they switch over to this, and what is that impact on their outgoing communications and reporting and tracking that we're going to implement from this. Because, as I said, there's a lot more overhead and resources needed than just what's put in the budget for the conversion effort.
Director Gallo, do you have a comment, or would you like to?
Yeah, just a comment. I wanted to follow up with Carrie, with Carrie's comments about the IT department. And last year, the building department, we started looking into other options for the software that we use, and then of course the pandemic hit, so we couldn't gather to do follow-up demonstrations, and a lot of the building department was furloughed, of course, so they weren't available. And then the IT department was scrambling to set everybody up with remote working during that time as well. So we're a little bit behind. So I told Director Kopfer, I asked to have it in the budget for this year. Hopefully we're able to make a decision this year. Nothing else happens to delay this process. So that was all. I just wanted to follow up with Director Kopfer's comment.
Do you think that you could supply us, as Mr. Limpert suggested, with some kind of forecast cost as we move forward over the next couple of years. Maybe you and the Director Kupfer can do that.
Yes.
Okay, that would be good. Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we could talk about something else. What do you got? Mr.
You're muted, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate time, but I wanted to bring up the one change from the mayor's temporary budget to council's temporary budget to the mayor's permanent budget that I'd like to see left in there would be the street sweeper as opposed to the snow plow. And I'd be more than happy to entertain a snow plow in July if the budget, if the numbers look good. And I wanted to read from you. Tony wasn't able to be here because he has a funeral today, but he did. He wanted me to read a statement from him. He said, "Thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide additional information on the street sweeper. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend because I have a funeral this evening, the presentation today. However, after today's meeting, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about any of the equipment being purchased. The street sweeper we are interested in replacing is over 20 years old. The repairs we have made have helped extend the life expectancy of the street sweeper. However, moving forward, all repairs will be costly and will require lengthy shop time. MTech has a brand new street sweeper that has only been demoed with our department. The equipment demonstration was complete in our streets on November 6th with our service department, and then again, our mechanics in the fleet garage for a more in-depth viewing on December 9th. If approved, the new street sweeper will be available once the purchase order is complete. The street sweeper is vital to our service department storm maintenance program. The street sweeper is beneficial to keeping street debris such as leaves, rocks, garbage, and other sediment from entering the catch basins and clogging storm laterals. Our intention is to sell the old street sweeper on gov deals. And that's directly from Tony. Like I said, I think this is one of the most important, the three most important pieces of equipment talked about were the vac truck, the street sweeper, as well as the mini excavator. And as I said, I would be more than happy to entertain in as early as June, depending on how the numbers look, to actually go ahead and look at purchasing a snowplow truck.
Chuck, would you put that picture up? I wanted to share this with everybody because I had this summer I had a couple meetings with guys from the storm crew when they were working in Bretton Ridge and Park Ridge. Could you put that up for us, that picture, Chuck? This is a photograph. Actually, it's from one of the vac trucks. I don't know which one. This is the stuff that they pull out of the sewers, and this is gravel. This is the stuff that should be getting swept up. I think that council has to understand that a lot of that could be picked up. If it isn't, the gravel wears down the roads. It costs us money that way, and then it ends up in the catch basins and in the sewers. And it's not easy to move that stuff out of the sewers. That's one of the things the guys told me. And you know, you can jet it, but it only goes so far because it's gravel. It's chunks of gravel and chunks of concrete. And if it's allowed to dry, it becomes hard as a rock. So just wanted to share that. Mr. Broussard, you had
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just I wanted to point out that I did have a conversation last week with Mr. Demeline in our service department regarding the existing 20-plus-year-old street sweeper, and he indicates, and I'm paraphrasing, I believe I've got most of the details accurate. He indicated that the middle brush, which is one of the primary brushes on that vehicle, is inoperable and unrepairable, and so the effectiveness obviously is compromised. of that existing sweeper. But just as importantly, if not more importantly, it causes the crew to go back over the same street a second time. So we're using additional man hours on that existing sweeper just to get it done the right way. So I wanted to add that in. Thank you.
Sorry, Council President, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the street sweeper will help with flooding, then I would definitely be in support of that. I just would like to have an explanation, and perhaps tonight's not the night since the service department couldn't be here, but I'd still like an explanation as to why, if you have 7 salt trucks, 1 street sweeper, and the street sweeper was in such bad shape, why was a salt truck requested from council last year? Why wasn't a street sweeper requested as a purchase last year or even the year before? I would also like to know what the average lifespan of a street sweeper is. And perhaps instead of buying a salt truck this summer, if the average lifespan of a street sweeper is not 20 years, maybe the administration should consider purchasing an additional street sweeper to help our city.
Did you want to respond to that, Mr. Mayor? Is there?
Look, that's generous. I would be happy to do that. I'm just hoping to get 1 for starters. But I know Tony's done extensive amount of work on that to extend the life of that street sweeper. But it's certainly on its last leg. I asked him today, I go, would you even keep that around as a backup? And he said, just the repairs are probably too extensive on it to make sense for keeping it around.
Councilwoman Heeman, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. I am equally concerned that this was never brought to our attention before. The service records on that are 400 pages. I diligently looked at them all, and I've never heard that we needed a street sweeper, that it was in horrible shape, and it is, flooding has been around forever. We've been at meetings where people are screaming, yelling. So I equally do not understand why this was not brought to our attention before and how it was missed for so many years as something we did not need. And I'm happy to purchase it. But I think that, the city can't afford to have those kinds of slips when in fact then, residents are screaming about flooding and they're acting like we're doing nothing about it. And the reality is if we needed the equipment, we should have known that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I would answer the councilwoman. We did bring it up. We had the foreman talk about it in this year's budget, and you guys took it out of the budget. That's why we're asking for it back in the budget. So.
I don't want to.
We have not heard about it before.
My meeting, Mary Ellen, my meeting. We're not going to do this. We're not going to tit for tat on this. Everybody understands what we're doing here. Let's talk about something else now. Let's move on. I think we've already beat this subject up enough. In my head, the reason that we don't we hadn't heard a lot about it is because Tony kept the other one running for way longer than it normally would have been running. So enough said. Any other questions, other subjects perhaps? Mr. Glassburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go back to the big numbers. When we had the temporary budget, we had a projected January 1st general fund unencumbered budget of $3 million, which clearly was an estimate, but we're now at 4.2. How did we gain $1.2 million between Thanksgiving and the first of the year?
That wasn't from Thanksgiving to the first of the year, Mr. Chair. That was the original estimate. And if, as Mr. Glassburn points out repeatedly, the budgeted revenues and budgeted current year revenues and current year expenses if we expended our entire, and we do budget our entire fund balance, we could be in a world of hurt. And so I estimate what I reasonably think it could be. Did I think it could possibly be more? Yes. But what helped us a lot was that $1.4 million that we were able to adjust out of the service, I'm not service, rather, safety forces, wages and benefits for the CARES Act funding. And in addition, while we didn't, we were still lower by $500,000 for our revenue, for our original revenue estimates. We came fairly close to our revised revenue estimate. So the majority of it was the increase in, or the reduction of expenses. And so that is where it came from. And I wrote it down somewhere, the exact amount. And I can't find it with me, but I will find it for you. But that's where it came from. And as I said, I want to be conservative in these preliminary projections, because if we have it all in there and it all gets budgeted out, and then we have to make a lot of difficult choices, we'd rather make the difficult choices as the administration ahead of time, and then we're able to add, especially in this year, 2020 and 21, it was a very tumultuous year, budget-wise and actual-wise. So, and at the end of the year, there was no end in sight at that point, as we all agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm all for conservative budgeting, but in the temporary appropriations, all funds balance we received around Thanksgiving, which we're glad to get it early. That was something we're happy about. We had a projection that the end of the year unencumbered balance would be around 35.6 million. We're now looking at 40.8 as to where it ended. That's a $5 million difference. That is not a small difference. The spending in that document was at 56 million. We're now at 75 million. That's an increase of the budget that we started with by a third. That's not a small difference. That's not holding a handful of things back so that we, don't get ahead of ourselves. That's leaving out a quarter of the budget. And so what I'm getting at is that this is a new budget. And I think we have to treat it that way, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we're not hearing you. I'm not sure if you're on mute or what's going on. Still not hearing you.
Not hearing you.
Mr. Vice Chair, I have a question, unless the chair's back.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, so just along with Mr. Glassburn's comments, so this to the finance director. So, I'm all for sort of a conservative estimate in the temporary budget because I agree it's a lot easier to expand things than cut things. But trying to understand why we've expanded a greater in expenditures than we've increased in revenues. So I get it, we got some grant money and things like that, but I'm not sure why we're expanding some of the other items in the expenditure list if that's going to increase our overall expenditures versus the increase in revenues.
Anyone from the administration want to, Dwayne, is that a question or a statement?
Yeah, it's a question. I just, I know you mentioned before that, a lot of that stuff was already planned for in reserves, but it just seems like, I don't know why we'd open up the reserves further post the initial temporary budget, going beyond what the revenues coming in are, unless Mr. Glassburn's point isn't correct.
Anyone from the administration care to comment?
It's somewhat difficult to discuss when you guys are referring to numbers and I don't know what you're looking at exactly. I'm sure you feel that way when I talk a lot too, so I'm not begrudging you, but if you would like to call
Yeah,
me.
here's a prime example. Thank you. Prime example, right? So prime example. So we're expanding the hardware ask from what was in the budget, right? By 95,000. And it just seems like unless we got that additional revenue in, that's going to cover that from your initial estimates. I thought you were saying this is coming out of a balance. This coming out of the general fund, right?
Well, it is, but it had to anyway, like that. And these are things that the monies that they budgeted for it in the capital fund, there were no monies available in the capital fund. And because some of the projects had money left over, it didn't flush out until the final budget when we did our borrowed monies carry forward that then showed us exactly, hey, this there's no money in this for these projects. And they had to go out of the general fund, but they're critical pieces. This is our ruckus infrastructure hardware. This is like that fiber, it's the redundancy, and it's all part of the plan, the big plan that's been moving forward for several years on this. So it's nothing that you cannot do. And that's why it is in the general fund, and it intended to be in the general fund in the beginning. So I apologize for that. The $20,000, you're right. But the questions that council and the mayor have, why should we keep spending on some of these things if we want to go to something else? Well, you can't go to something else if you don't have anything in the budget to move to or to pay for that move. So you want to stop, reduce expenditures here, but you need to spend money in some of these instances to be able to move forward with the IT strategy that hopefully will then come back into a not as much of an expenditure as we've had over the last few years. But unfortunately, IT is expensive and technology, and it's difficult to manage it. I will agree with you.
Am I back online now? You guys hear me? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Okay, who else got their hand up? Nobody else? Okay, Mr. Glassburn, you want to keep going?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a general fund balance now of 900,000 plus, which again, I'm still trying to understand how we got there, but we have a number of our other funds that we're still deficit spending. Casualty loss, separation pay, we're spending $250,000, or reducing the balance by $250,000. Street maintenance, $500,000. Hotel motel, almost $200,000. EMS, $275,000. Hospitalization, $450,000. Workers' comp, $350,000. In weighing these, again, whatever the amount is, $1 million of things that aren't grants, I'm having a hard time looking at doing new things without restoring some of these funds first or reducing how much we're going into the deficit. So if the administration would like to respond to that, generally, I'll yield for the moment.
Director?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to say, let me come up with a written explanation. I think that may be more valuable than us counting numbers back and forth. And I think that I can do that. Also, if you look at the fourth quarter financial review, I think we discussed some of the things where we're comparing the actual, especially in the general fund, the revenue and expenditures. I think you'll get a flavor as to how we ended the year with the $4.2 million balance And then therefore it allowed us to then have $1 million balance nearly projected for 2021, which I might add is a dramatic improvement from the $859. So I will come up with do something in writing. I think it'll be more productive.
Okay. Go ahead. Any more questions? Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Kopfer, just a few questions on benefits and salaries. On both the temporary and the permanent budget, I noticed that the total benefits in almost every division either went up or down. What were the reasonings for that across the board?
You're muted. You're muted, Carrie.
I'm sorry, are you referring to the 2020 budget results, or are you referring to the 2021 appropriations ordinance?
The permanent budget that was just presented to council, yeah, this year, and then versus the temporary budget.
The only changes that were made to wages and benefits, none were made other than what's on this spreadsheet. So there are no differences from that point. The administration final temporary budget to the permanent appropriations. So there were no changes made to that.
So, okay, so then, for example, on like in the wastewater treatment plant, the superintendent, his salary, it looks like there's an additional line of a little over 19,000. That was not in the temporary budget, that was in the permanent budget that was submitted to us. And then also in wastewater treatment, it looks like there's almost 30,000 that it looks like it's not assigned to maybe an employee. I'm not sure. I can tell you what page.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. Could you tell me that real quick?
Yeah. Page 213 in the permanent budget. And that's the one, that's the superintendent one that I saw.
I know exactly what that is. And I do believe that was one of the final amendments in the administration temporary budget, not from like the first reading of it, but this is the part-timer that in wastewater that was not included in the budget in error. So that's that 19,000 is the part-time clerical staff.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so for example, okay, so the clerical staff is listed under the wastewater treatment plant superintendent.
Under administration, yeah.
Okay, and then under sanitary systems, additional seasonal salaries. So those were not in the temporary budget. Was that just also an oversight, and now that's why it was presented in the permanent budget?
Hold on, what page was that on, just so I can get there quicker?
I think 236, I think is what I was looking at. Sorry, I have many papers.
No, I apologize, I know, and 15 versions of it, I'm sure. Are you looking at the 23,400?
Yep. Yes. Yep.
Versus the seasonal. Yeah, that I'll have to double check But I mean, I don't believe this was added at this for the permanent budget. This was added before the temporary admin final was passed. And I do believe I remember wastewater, their part-time people did not get put into the budget on the first go around. So I do believe we did have to add them. And the 23.4 are part-time people, and then the salary seasonal are the summer help kids.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So are there any non-bargaining employees receiving pay increases this year in 2021? Not any carryover because of union contracts, but just any other people.
You're muted, Carrie.
Mayor, are you aware of any? I'm not.
I think there were, when we bargained with the union, we gave a slight raise for the union for having some of their I don't know what the terminology is. So we gave that also to the to management people. I believe that's for some of their licenses that they carry. Didn't we give that to the union, and customarily we give it to the non-union people too? So there might have been a little bump there, but not much.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield right now.
You're all right. If you want to keep going, you have anything else you want to?
Well, let me. At this point, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Glassburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the programs the council has done on small business and COVID relief, we've passed ordinances. In this proposal, we have funding for new programs, but I haven't heard an explanation of what those are or how they are going forward. Can we get some background on what that is?
Mr. Mayor, do you want to take that?
I'll let Kim start that out. It's a program that we've worked on quite a bit, and I'll let Kim. She's there, so I'll let you go ahead.
Director Lieber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have been working on formulating a technical assistance program for local business based upon our observation of some of the struggles of business and occupying commercial space in the city, and also aware of the struggles of some of our current business and how, while the pandemic may have negatively impacted some sectors, that it's also become an engine of entrepreneurship, and that we are anticipating more small new businesses to be created and to be looking for space and to be operating as we kind of rebound out of the pandemic. So a conversation started probably over a year ago between me and Director Gallo around technical assistance, where we saw some businesses struggle as they may be good business operators, but may not be great at doing all the steps they need to get into their commercial space. And so we're looking for ways that we can help bridge the gap between a business person with a great idea and the barriers to actually being open, having their certificate of occupancy. So going beyond the traditional types of assistance that a building department could supply. So we've had that in discussion for a while. And along the way, we've also picked up a partnership with the Small Business Development Center, operated out of CSU, that was doing similar but different things for local businesses with their CARES Act funding. So we are proposing a pilot program, a small business technical assistance program, where businesses or potential businesses could receive free consulting, either paid for through the Small Business Development Center, through their funding, or through consulting work that the city would pay for on behalf of that existing or potential business owner. So there will be legislation that will have to come before council for any contract with any professional that we would identify to provide those services. The Small Business Development Center funding should cover their portion of services. So we discussed how, technical services are just, or technical assistance is one part of the puzzle. So potentially if you're a small business owner and you receive consulting on an issue such as marketing, accounting, business law, other financial issues, or in our case, on the city side, looking at occupying a commercial space, and then the result of that technical assistance is a need that for either software, for infrastructure improvements, for building improvements, for some type of additional element to help your business succeed and grow, then the second portion of it would be the mini grant portion, where the city could fund small grants for businesses that would participate in the technical assistance to then help them overcome whatever that barrier was identified through that program. So there will be some level of additional legislation required for the technical assistance program, but at this point, as we work through the details with the SBDC, we've also recently reached out to the chamber for help with marketing and their feedback. We'll be able to bring council more information as well, but that is the gist and the goal of the technical assistance program.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, if I could just add to it, this is something that we've been working on for a while. Probably I spend more time with businesses that come into the community that lease a space, and then they realize, well, geez, I've got to put in a bathroom, and all of a sudden they have all these ADA requirements, and I've got a sign for the place. Oh, well, it doesn't meet our sign code. There's a whole bunch of little things. And again, this doesn't impact like the car dealerships or the big guys. They have guys on their staff that do this, It's the little guy, it's the cupcake company that comes in and just wants to sell cupcakes, but doesn't realize they're getting into all sorts of little problems when they go to redo their place, particularly if you go and make a standard retail spot a restaurant. There is a whole bunch of different things that you should know before you're doing that, and that's what we want to make available to them. And more often than not, by the time they're calling me and trying to fix things, it's too late. They have to do these things. So I think just preparing them for what's ahead is probably one of the most important things we can do for them. Again, I spend a lot of time, and again, it's always the little mom and pop shops that they just want to sell cupcakes or whatever they do very well, but they're getting in a little bit over their head on rules and regulations, often by the state building codes.
Director Lieber, is this the program that they were using on the Euclid corridor? Is that the Cleveland State? I read something about this. Is that what Cleveland State was doing?
I'm not familiar with that, if it's the same thing. I haven't found too many models of this type of technical assistance in the world. I know the SBDC tends to focus on more business operations, not building issues, but the issues that businesses bring to us tend to be the building issues. So we wanted to add that layer of technical assistance onto this existing resource, and seemed a best way of doing it together. How CSU might have leveraged assistance in Euclid corridor, I'm not entirely sure, but I'll be happy to try and track that information down for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So it sounds like a good idea. Thank you. Mr. Glassburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm trying to understand the niche here. If a business has problems and needs to add a restroom, if they come to the city or interact with the city, why wouldn't our building department staff assist them with helping to solve their problem? I'm not sure what a $10,000 consultant would do that's unique or better, or how that would solve that situation better than our in-house staff would, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, our building staff will review plans that are submitted and provide assistance at the counter. We're envisioning something where a professional would go to the space, do some document research, apply their code knowledge to make recommendations to that business owner about what upgrades or improvements would be required that go really beyond what our building department legally should be doing or offering in terms of advice to businesses. Our building department is the reviewer, they're the enforcer, they're the permit issuer, they're not the designer, they're not the architect. So this is, again, kind of the gap that we're seeing from time to time, where that advice on the front end, potentially even before a business enters into a lease or extends their lease, where somebody with that expertise can help them make better business decisions up front. So yes, our building department can provide excellent customer service, but they can't act as the architect or design professional for a business.
Go ahead, Mr. Glassburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the debate on the small business grants, the first time around, small business relief grants, there was a lot of concern that $50,000 wasn't significant, or that a $2,500 individual award wasn't significant. The pool we're talking about here is $15,000, which is far less. How is this going to be impactful when what we were discussing before was too small, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, so we're envisioning $10,000 towards technical assistance because we also know that the Small Business Development Center has resources and funding available on their end. So they'll be able to bring some resources to the table without a city contribution, and then $15,000 for mini grants. And we are envisioning this as a pilot program this year to see how it works, to iron out any bugs, and to see what the interest level is after we conduct some outreach through the chamber and through other resources. So we simply don't want to pile a ton of resources into something that we haven't worked through yet, but we're really excited about this program. We've gotten some initial positive feedback through a few conversations about it. And if it is successful and well received, then it's something we think we can grow into the future and can be part of our budget in future years. So this is, we're just wading out into this new program and hope to have success and continue in the future.
Go ahead, Mr. Glassburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, you know, we went back and forth a lot on the value of economic development consultant services. And in previous years, we spent $20,000, and this will make it so that we spend even more than $20,000. I think given the situation right now, we're probably better served by more direct relief, but I guess we'll all have our own opinions on this. But Mr. Chair, I guess I'll close with my comments for tonight, because I know we're going on a long time on this subject with, you know, as Mr. Limpert said, and we have a lot of new expenditures here. If we knew that we had available resources, I think we would have treated the temporary budget process differently. You know, as a council, we committed to and agreed with the administration of proposing a balanced set of amendments where took one thing, you know, put something in and take something out. This doesn't do that. I don't know that we need to do 4 days of hearings, but perhaps either a weekend day or another longer time period. This is a different document, and so this is not just technical amendments. So I think we owe it to the various things that we've not funded, as well as those that we've cut, to be able to spend some time and actually look at these available resources and what in totality we're going to spend them on. Because otherwise I just don't think we're doing our role in this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You know, I don't have a problem with continuing this discussion. I certainly don't. I don't know what our maybe Mr. Garreau can answer this. What is our timetable on this? When do we actually have to have a permanent budget in place?
It's the charter. The charter provides 90 days. It's the end of next month.
Okay, so we have a little bit of room here to discuss things,
And
clarify things.
it's, even though we say, I think this one says declaring an emergency, it's effective immediately upon passage
Sure.
by charter. So it pass. You have some time.
Okay. Director Kopfer, you've been asked to provide some further information, and you have said that you would be happy to do that in writing, and that sounds like a good idea. Perhaps we could give you a little bit of time for that.
Yes, I think that I mean it's more of an overview of the resources, and I think that I'll do it in writing, and then we can talk about that. I think that would be a little more effective than just asking one question here or there. But if people have specific questions on that, I'd be more than happy to incorporate them into my comments.
So if anybody has specific questions, perhaps they could email them to you at their earliest convenience. And perhaps Director Lieber could give us more background. This legislation will be coming before us, but as long as it's in the budget and it's new, maybe we could talk about that a little bit too. So, Mr. Glassburn, you got something else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you establish or go forward with your schedule on this, I would suggest that we have at least perhaps a meeting or a time period of a meeting for considering amendments. There were items that the majority of council passed that are not in here. And so I think it would be wise of us to assume there are going to be at least discussion of amendments, if not amendments, in this process. Thank you.
I'm totally expecting that. So, Ms. Williamson? You're muted still.
Seems to be the problem of the evening, right?
Yes, yeah.
As far as pre-employment testing or civil service testing, has any additional funding been added to these line items or no?
Pre-employment
Are
testing.
we not anticipating using or providing any civil service? Yes, Director Gallo. It's not my meeting, but I'm calling on you. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. But I am here. That's fine.
Before we did the budget for civil service, the civil service secretary consulted with both chiefs and asked about potential retirements coming up in 2021. And so we budgeted based on the information we received for potential retirements. They kind of know that some of these retirements are coming, but nothing is really set in stone until we receive like an official letter. But I feel that we've budgeted appropriately for civil service for the testing and so forth.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Gallo, does that also include all of the drug testing and any other background checks that come along with that? Okay, thank you.
Yes, it does. We do in the human resources budget, we have a line item for pre-employment testing, but in the civil service budget, we include a line item for pre-employment testing as it relates to civil service hires, and that includes the drug testing, the PRADCO testing they go through, things like that. So yes, we do.
Thank you.
Very good. I'm going to go ahead and ask that we hold this in committee, make a motion, we hold this in committee, and ask for a second.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to second that, but I believe Councilwoman Heeman had a last second question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Heeman, you have your hand up. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Mr. Broussard. When we're submitting questions to, for example, the finance director, in her response, would it be possible for us to know what the question was that was submitted and then the response? We don't have to know who submitted it, but I think just to know what the question was and then we see the response, we can at least all say, oh, okay, because I spent several hours going between, the temporary budget and then this. And it was really hard to piece it all back together. And, you know, so knowing what the question was and then the answer would, I think, be very helpful to us all. Thank you.
Good plan. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make that motion that
And I'll
we
go-
hold this in committee.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
And that's 3-0. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. It's 8:40, if anybody was wondering.